It all began with a single phone call, a conversation that neither Can Yaman nor Demet Özdemir could ever erase from their memories. For years, they had lived under the spotlight, their love story unfolding not only on screen but in the whispers of fans, in the flash of cameras, and in the countless headlines that followed their every move. They had been partners in fiction, but what grew between them was far from scripted. It was raw, real, and filled with the kind of emotions that blur the line between acting and living. And yet, as powerful as their connection seemed, it only took one late-night conversation to change everything. That night, Demet's heart was heavy. She had spent hours replaying the same thoughts, the same unanswered questions, over and over again. Should she call him? Would he even answer? The silence between them had already stretched too long, but silence is never neutral, it either heals, or it destroys. And so, with trembling hands and a voice she barely recognized as her own, she dialed his number. Can was thousands of miles away, but when he saw her name flash across his screen, it was as if the distance evaporated. His chest tightened. He had been waiting, hoping, almost begging in silence for this call to come. But he hadn't prepared for what her voice would carry. There was a fragility in Demet's tone, a hesitation that spoke louder than words. And in that single moment, before she even said a full sentence, Can knew, nothing would ever be the same again. Their conversation was not long. It didn't need to be. Sometimes, the most powerful words are spoken in fragments, in pauses, in the spaces where two hearts fail to meet halfway. She told him what she had seen, what she had felt, and what she could no longer endure. He listened, silent, stunned, 1,000 thoughts racing behind his steady breath. But when the silence fell at the end, neither of them reached out to stop it. Neither of them fought for the us they had once sworn to protect. And that was it. One conversation. One night. One truth that broke through every illusion. The world outside would never know what was said between them, but those words carved a scar that would follow them through every future encounter, every glance, every smile forced for the cameras. It was the moment that turned their story from a fairy tale into a memory, from a promise into a regret. Before that night's conversation, there was already a silence growing between Can and Demet, an invisible wall that neither wanted to admit existed. On the surface, everything looked fine. Their names still appeared together in articles, their smiles still lit up red carpets, and fans continued to believe in the fairy tale they had created both on screen and off. But behind the cameras, reality was far more complicated. Demet had always been the one who carried her emotions close to her chest. She wasn't the type to expose her deepest fears easily, not even to someone who once knew her better than anyone else. But with Can, she had allowed herself to be vulnerable, she had trusted him with pieces of her heart she had never shown before. That's why the growing distance between them hurt so much. It wasn't just physical miles separating them, it was the silence, the unspoken words, the unanswered messages. For Can, life was a whirlwind. Projects in Italy, endless meetings, the suffocating weight of fame. Wherever he went, people wanted something from him, his time, his charm, his presence. But the one person he truly wanted to give himself to, the one person he thought about when the lights went out at night, was slowly slipping away. And the cruelest part? He felt powerless to stop it. In the weeks leading up to that call, Demet tried to stay strong. She told herself he was busy, that the distance didn't mean indifference. She went to events, smiled for cameras, laughed with friends. But deep down, her heart knew. She noticed the missed opportunities, the moments where he could have reached out but didn't, the silence that grew louder each day. The night she finally picked up the phone, she wasn't just calling him, she was calling for closure. She needed to know whether their story still had life in it, or if it was already over. What she didn't realize was that Can was waiting for the same thing. He too had been carrying words he couldn't say out loud. He too had been staring at his phone, hoping it would ring, fearing what it might mean if it finally did. It was the perfect storm, two hearts full of love but drowned in doubt. And so, when Demet's name appeared on his screen, Can's world froze. He knew instinctively, this conversation would not be just another phone call. It would be the conversation. The one that would define everything that came after. When Can finally answered, there was a pause. One that seemed to stretch across oceans. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence itself was heavy, like two hearts recognizing the weight of what was about to unfold. Can, Demet's voice trembled, softer than he remembered, almost breaking on the edges. In that single word, she carried all the confusion, the longing, and the pain she had been holding back for weeks. He closed his eyes as if by doing so he could escape the truth pressing against his chest. Demet, he whispered back, his tone low, careful, almost afraid. What followed wasn't a heated argument, nor the kind of tearful reconciliation that movies often portray. Instead, it was something far more devastating: honesty. The kind of raw honesty that strips away illusions and leaves nothing to hide behind. Demet told him about the emptiness she felt whenever her phone stayed silent. She spoke of the nights she stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he thought of her the way she thought of him. She confessed how tired she was of pretending to the world that everything was perfect when in reality, she felt abandoned. Can listened, his heart pounding, his breath uneven. He wanted to interrupt, to tell her she was wrong, that he had never stopped caring. But the truth was undeniable: he hadn't been there. Not when she needed him. Not in the ways she deserved. When his turn came, Can's words were hesitant, stumbling between what he wished to say and what he feared would push her further away. "I never stopped thinking of you, but I thought you were strong enough. I thought you understood," his voice cracked. "Maybe I expected too much." There it was, the fracture. The realization that love alone wasn't enough. That misunderstandings, silence, and distance had carved a wound too deep to ignore. Demet's reply was simple, but it shattered him. "I can't keep waiting for you to come back, Can. I can't live in the spaces between your promises and your absence." A silence followed. Colder this time, final in its weight. They both knew what it meant, even if neither dared to say it out loud. That call, those words, were not just a conversation. They were a goodbye, veiled in truth and drenched in regret. And as the line went quiet, Can realized something that would haunt him for years: some words, once spoken, cannot be taken back. When the call ended, Demet sat in the dark, phone still in her hand, staring at the screen as if it might light up again. But it didn't. The silence that followed was heavier than the conversation itself. It wasn't just the absence of his voice, it was the echo of finality. She had spoken the words she had been afraid to say, and in return, she had received the confirmation she dreaded, that their love was no longer enough. Tears came quietly at first, streaming down her face without resistance. She wasn't crying for the breakup itself. She was crying for the lost possibilities, the unspoken dreams, the life they had once imagined together. She thought of the nights when they would stay up until dawn, laughing about nothing and everything. She thought of the way he used to look at her, as if she was the only person in the world who mattered. And now, all of that felt like a memory slipping out of reach. Across the miles, Can was in his apartment, sitting alone in the half-light of a lamp. His phone lay on the table, the call log glowing with her name. He wanted to call back, to say something, anything, that could undo what had just happened. But his hand wouldn't move. For the first time in his life, the man who always had the right words, the confidence, the strength, had none. He felt paralyzed, as if speaking now would only make the wound deeper. The next morning, the world went on as if nothing had changed. Paparazzi snapped pictures of Demet arriving at a studio, smiling politely for the cameras. Fans crowded around Can in Italy, shouting his name, asking for autographs. But behind those practiced smiles and gestures, both of them were breaking. Demet's eyes betrayed her even when her lips curved into a smile. Those who knew her well noticed the dullness, the way her laughter didn't quite reach her eyes. She was there, physically present, but emotionally, she was elsewhere, stuck in that phone call, replaying every word. Can, meanwhile, drowned himself in work. He accepted interviews, posed for photos, threw himself into rehearsals. To the outside world, he looked unstoppable, handsome, confident, untouchable. But at night, when the lights went off and the applause faded, the silence returned. And in that silence, he could still hear her voice, trembling, telling him she couldn't wait anymore. Neither of them spoke publicly about it. Not then. Not ever in detail. But those close to them sensed it, something had shifted. Something irreversible. And though the fans kept writing fairy tales about them, in private, both Can and Demet knew, one conversation had changed everything. It didn't take long for people around them to sense the shift. The media might have painted smiles on their faces, but true fans always notice the details, the hesitation in Demet's eyes, the stiffness in Can's body language. Suddenly, interviews that once flowed with warmth now felt colder, more calculated. At press events, when asked about each other, both of them gave answers that were polite but distant. Gone were the playful exchanges, the knowing glances, the inside jokes that once lit up every room. Instead, their words seemed rehearsed, carefully chosen to hide the truth. But the silence between those words spoke volumes. Fans flooded social media with theories. Some said they had fought, others insisted it was only distance, and many refused to believe there was any problem at all. Hashtags still trended, photo edits of them together still spread like wildfire, and fan videos still racked up millions of views. But under the surface, their fairy tale had cracked. Demet's close friends noticed the way she avoided questions about her personal life. They saw how she sometimes excused herself, needing a quiet moment alone, as if trying to gather the strength to face the world again. For her, the call wasn't just an ending, it was also a secret she had to carry, one that no one else could truly understand. Can's inner circle noticed the difference too. He worked harder, stayed longer hours on set, and seemed determined to keep himself so busy that he wouldn't have to think. But when the night came and the cameras disappeared, he carried the weight of the call like a chain around his chest. He knew that the silence he had left after her words was his greatest mistake. The world didn't know exactly what had happened, but they felt it. And that unspoken truth only fueled the mystery, turning their love story into something larger than life, something fans would never stop talking about. Years may pass, new projects may come, and both Can and Demet may walk separate paths, but that night, the call that changed everything, remains etched in both of their hearts. It wasn't a fight, it wasn't betrayal, it wasn't even a dramatic goodbye screamed in anger. It was something far more haunting, two souls admitting that love alone wasn't enough to carry them through the silence, the distance, the weight of fame. For Demet, it became the night she stopped waiting. She chose herself, her peace, her dignity, even if it meant breaking her own heart. For Can, it became the night he realized that silence can hurt more than any cruel word, that sometimes, not calling back speaks louder than anything else. And though the world may never know the exact words they exchanged, everyone knows this truth. That one conversation changed them forever. It turned lovers into memories, promises into regrets, and what could have been into what will never be. Even now, when fans look at old photos or rewatch scenes of them together, they still feel the magic. But behind that magic lies the story of two people who learned, in the hardest way possible, that sometimes, it only takes a single conversation to rewrite the destiny of two hearts. One call. One night. One truth. And nothing was ever the same for Can and Demet.